So I came across this post on Twitter discussing some of the differences between isekai and anime and in America. Isekai is a subgenre of fantasy where an ordinary person gets transported to another world. This genre was very popular in anime to the point where it ended up being oversaturated, where companies would pump out isekai shows to the point where we were getting over 20 shows every year. This has resulted in quite a bit of backlash towards the subgenre, since many of these stories are pretty weak and ultimately feel like cash grabs. Sure, there are plenty of good isekai, but the amount of underwhelming ones are pretty overwhelming. The meme on Twitter describes Japanese isekai as, "I'm an average loser transported into a JRPG full of hot cat girls and elves." This is because a lot of these animes tend to be wish fulfillment for the audience, so they can insert themselves into a power fantasy and escape their mundane lives for a bit. These protagonists end up being a blank slate in order to relate to as many people as possible, and seeing the same story over and over again gets a little tiring, hence the backlash. But it doesn't seem like isekai are going anywhere anytime soon. And again, there are plenty of good ones. The second half of the meme is a reference to Stargate, a movie and series from the 90s in which an artifact is discovered in Egypt, which opens a wormhole to a distant planet. This whole thing got me thinking about Western isekai, since the idea of being transported to another world is a pretty universal idea. We don't see it nearly as much as we see it in Japanese media, but it is still pretty prevalent. This isn't meant to be comparing or contrasting what we see in anime versus what we see in the West. Just some fun observations. I think the first American isekai, at least to my knowledge, would be The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was first published in 1900. It had a well-known movie adaptation in 1939. It's about a girl named Dorothy who lives on a farm in Kansas. She's pretty discontent with her life. The farm is pretty drab and not exciting, and she's constantly being harassed by her neighbor who hates her dog, and even wants to put poor Toto down. So Dorothy dreams of a different world where she can escape to. The only source of color she really gets in her life is whenever there's a rainbow, and when a tornado comes through and she isn't able to get to safety, it ends up transporting her to the land of Oz, the exact kind of magical and colorful world over the rainbow she'd been dreaming of. And I love the way the film interpreted this, filming the farm scenes in black and white, and then Oz in Technicolor, which was groundbreaking at the time. And the way they got this effect was pretty cool. After the tornado lands, the set was made in sepia tone, and for the shot where Dorothy opens the door revealing the land of Oz, they had a stunt double dressed in a sepia tone costume and makeup, who walks out of frame after the door opens. Then Judy walks into frame wearing her regular costume, making for a pretty seamless transition, which was really groundbreaking at the time. And honestly, a lot of this film still holds up really well today. They did make some changes from the source material, like Dorothy's shoes were silver in the book, but in the movie they were changed to ruby slippers, along with the ending being changed. In the book, Oz is a real place that Dorothy visits, and she has a lot of adventures there in later volumes, but in the movie it was changed to just being a dream, which admittedly I'm not a huge fan of, but it's not like they made sequels to this film. Although it would have been cool to see some adaptations of the later novels, but still an overall great movie. And there are a lot of other great and beloved isekai from the West, like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, The Chronicles of Narnia, even Harry Potter if you really think about it. Also Space Jam. We even have an isekai where you're sucked into a video game with Tron. That's a pretty popular subgenre of a subgenre in Japanese isekai. And then there are more modern shows like Amphibia or The Owl House. So we get a lot of fun variety and unique stories. Like Amphibia is about a girl who gets transported to a world of frogs. That's pretty different, and they do a great job fleshing out the world. And I think isekai is honestly a really charming genre. Although I do feel like sometimes there are shows that really don't need to be isekai, but for some reason are. Case in point, Rainbow Brite. This was a cartoon from the 80s. It was about a world that had been taken over by darkness, and it was full of monsters and mayhem. But a little girl named Wisp comes to the land to brave the darkness and return light and color to the world. She gathers allies and they travel the land together, freeing the color kids, each representing a color of the rainbow. Together they defeat the King of Shadows, and Wisp earns the new name Rainbow Brite, bringer of light and color to the universe. But their enemies are always right around the corner, trying to take over the universe and fill it with darkness and dread. So you'd think that'd be the show, right? Going on adventures, fighting the bad guys, standard fantasy fare. But the people behind the show decided that the story really needed some random Earth kid. So we get Brian. He's sad because he didn't make the school's baseball team, and Rainbow decides to cheer him up. So they go on an adventure together and he helps stop the bad guys, and then he feels better and decides to try out for the team again. Then Rainbow gives him a key so he can return whenever he wants. This is gonna sound really mean, but honestly I always felt like this kid was unnecessary, and could easily be replaced with one of the color kids. And sometimes he's more trouble than he's worth. Again, no offense. Like there's one episode where there's trouble in Rainbow Land, but Brian has a job delivering newspapers and Rainbow just tells him to finish up and don't worry about it. But instead he comes anyway. Then he does basically nothing, and even the color kids acknowledge this. So they let him stand watch, but he's a kid and what's he gonna do against the bad guys, so they get past him anyway, leading to Rainbow Brite being kidnapped. So he and Red Butler go to save her, only for Rainbow to just rescue herself. And then she gets picked up by Starlight, except the boys have now been kidnapped by the bad guys too, and they put them in a cave that's going to flood with water and drown them, and then Rainbow Brite has to go save them. If Brian hadn't been there, then Red would have just gone on with Starlight and picked up Rainbow Brite. He does take one from the team, which earns their respect. They probably added him because they felt like the kids at home needed someone to relate to. They had a habit of doing that back in the 80s. Like in the original version of My Little Pony, they had a girl named Megan and her brother Danny, who I also honestly didn't think were necessary. And later generations of My Little Pony didn't bother being isekais at all, just focusing on the fantasy world and the pony races. And it works fine, but maybe they thought kids would have trouble relating to magical beings and ponies, so they made these shows isekais, featuring average kids that the average kids at home could identify with. But I really don't think it's a big deal. Sure, these characters are fantastical, and yeah, that's not really relatable to an average person, but they're still fun and interesting. Personally, I always like to imagine myself as a cool character like Rainbow Brite, instead of just another ordinary kid. Or maybe characters like Bloom from Winx Club, who starts out as an ordinary girl, but then finds out she's actually a magical fairy princess. That just seems way more fun. I mean, that's kind of the point of isekai anyway. An escapist fantasy where you become an awesome hero in a really cool world. That's usually why the isekai character is the protagonist, so the audience can easily slip themselves into that role. I'm just saying. I don't hate Brian, I just think he wasn't that necessary of an inclusion. And I think isekais still have a lot to offer. It's true that anime got a little carried away with them, but as long as writers focus on fleshing out the story and not just have them be shallow cash grabs, they're still really cool and I like to see them. It's really entertaining to see a character react to a new and fantastical environment. I don't think isekai are going anywhere anytime soon, but at the same time, not everything needs to be an isekai, and I'm glad we're getting more shows that are just pure fantasy. But those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you think isekai have overstayed their welcome? Do you think I'm being too hard on Brian? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members. Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Spam, Lucas Geis, Jay Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Jink AZ, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Crimson Phantom, Dakari the Professor, Owen Wildish, Jin the Goblin, Datadyne Executive, Caleb Nelson, Todd McCaffrey, Killer Bomb, and Lil. Thank you all so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed this content, you can leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. I'd really appreciate the support. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.